Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Daniel and happy World Blender Meetup Day. Yes, this tutorial, this video is part of the content for it's my contribution per se for the World Blender Meetup Day, and I'm excited to be part of it. It's my first time and I'm very excited. So I just want to say a big thank you to all the organizers, everyone who has organized and put this up. Thank you very much. All right, so in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you my process for texturing hand painted, texturing skin in Blender, and it's going to be stylized, of course. It's going to be hand painted. So it's going to be 30 minutes in length as well. And just to let you know how it's going to be run, I'm not going to take everything from start to finish because it will, number one, it will probably take longer than 30 minutes, certainly longer than 30 minutes, and texturing is a very repetitive process, so I don't want to bore anyone. So instead, what I'm going to do, I'm going to texture, yes, and I'll also be sharing some tips so that it doesn't have to be too bloated. Yeah, so I'll share tips on sculpt on texturing while we go along, and I believe, hoping that this will help someone. Okay, so let's get into it. All right, now we'll go to the texture paint workspace, and this is where you'll be painting the textures. And though if you can also from the layout or any workspace at all, you can just hit Control Tab, and it brings up this menu, and you can go to texture paint from the layout workspace too. Okay, I'll go back, and we'll just use the texture paint workspace since it's optimized for that. And I'll click on New, set this to name this color, and it's already at 2K, so that's a 2048 by 2048 texture. Yeah, and I'll save this just so in case Blender crashes, I wouldn't lose everything I've done. And to get rid of this purplish look, we'll go to shading workspace, Shift A, texture, image texture, and I'll connect this output to the input of the base color on this shader. And then from this drop down menu, we'll select the color image, sorry, the color texture we just created. All right, and let's get back to texture paint now. All right, so we can start texturing this character now. I'll minimize this window, and I'll come over here to the brush tab, and I'm just going to brush toolbar. I'm going to drag it out so I can see the names. I just like it that way. And before you get into texturing, as you can see, these are the brushes over here, and these are the settings. Just as you have in sculpt mode, it's basically the same setup. Let's come back here, and by default it's set to draw. You can just start drawing, and if you find that the stroke behaves like this, it's because you have stabilized stroke turned on, and we're not going to need that, so just uncheck that. And last thing, before we get into texturing, I'm going to turn on symmetry, which will turn off later, just so that everything I do will be mirrored on the other side. All right, so when I texture my characters, I start with the fill tool. As it is, it's just black, it's nothing, and I do not want to start with the draw brush and start doing this. You get a color and start filling up everything. No, that's way too slow. So I'll just flood fill the whole thing. Go back to texture paint. You come to the fill tool, and I'm going to pick a base color from my color palette. And usually base colors for when you're texturing skin, your base color, it's usually not too saturated and it's a bit dull, and it's going to serve as the foundation that I'll build every other all the colors on and every other thing on. So it's very important, and I'm going to pick, I think, No, let's try this. Mm, okay, I'll try this one. Mm, let's try this. Huh, pretty much the same thing. I'll try this one. Nope. Okay, I think we'll stick with this one. So right now the fields were just filled everywhere with this one color, so everything is perfectly uniform, and that's it for the field. So we can go back to the draw brush now, and we can begin painting. So yeah. Now the first tip for painting skin is variety. I'll explain that. Now for painting skin has lots and lots of colors, so it's not just one color, no matter how it may seem. And especially when it comes to stylized works, people tend to think that, okay, it's not realistic, so you can just use one color. But actually there are several colors that you use to make skin look good, not just realistic but look good. So I'll turn down the strength of this Shift F, and I'll turn it down to 0.1, and I'll begin adding some. Actually, I think I'm going to reduce the saturation of this base color a bit. Just change it. Let's see. Just turn it down a bit. All right. Um. Okay. I think that's okay. This will be fine. All right. Let's get back to the draw brush, and now with symmetry turned on, and I'll pick some orange, orangey hues, and I'll begin painting. So I'm going to start with the places where you have the lighter skin tones, and also with some blood vessels, and just begin slightly painting over them. Just changing the color up, changing things up so it's not too uniform. And later on I'll turn off the mirror, the symmetry, so that we can actually break that uniformity better. Right. Okay, after I've painted a bit with that, I'm going to change it. Okay, I'm going to change it to uh, a reddish color, reddish hue, and I'll continue building on what I just finished painting. I'm going to paint around the eyes and the nose, and the ears as well. So as I said, that the first tip is variety, meaning that you don't just use one color and paint over the skin and just call it a day. Even if it's a stylized piece, a stylized character, there are still the same principles apply, just as you would a realistic character. Paint in different colors slightly. Oh, and by the way, to get the color palette, you want to add more colors, you open an image here. I'll get an image opened. So I'll probably open an image, probably a photo, and then I'll press the S key, and I'll right click, left click, and then I will sample the images, sample the colors over here and add them to this palette. So if I just cancel this, click on new, and then you can begin adding. You can do this from here, but this, this will be slower. You can just do click and click the plus button, and you'll be adding to the palette. So that's what I did, and I got all these colors. So I took a photo and held the S key, and I left clicked on the image, different spots, different places on the face, different angles, and yeah, different places, and I just got the colors over here in Blender. That's what I'm using. You just use various colors to build up the skin. I'm going to pick a pinkish color, and I'll increase the strength a bit so we can start working on the mouth, the lips. All right. And we're getting some bit of that color for the lips, not as dark as it was. And this bottom area, I'm going to apply it more, and also for the top. I'll zoom out. Oh, and by the way, as you paint, be sure to always save the images. So when you like what you're seeing, when you like how far you've gone or you've come, you can just save the images. You should save the images. So come here, image, and we'll save it. The shortcut is Alt S. I always use that. So you just Alt S, and it saves it to the disks. If you don't do that, if Blender crashes, you lose all your progress. So just be sure to do that. Okay, it's too harsh. I'm going to reduce it a bit. And around the cheeks, I'm just going to emphasize that. And now I'm going to pick some lighter tones for the forehead. And just begin painting over. It's good practice to zoom in and zoom out, so you don't paint too much and discover that it's off, so you just zoom out and examine the mesh, examine the model, examine the textures. All right, I'll hit Alt S, and let's see. Let's see how this is looking. So let's see. All right. So slow. This is in cycles. Let's see it in Eevee. Okay. All right. So we use cycles Eevee for now. Then at the end, I'll just show you cycles render. All right. So we'll continue building up the colors. Yeah. Actually, at this point, I'll go back and use a bit of some. I think this needs a bit more orange. Now, if I was painting a male character, the jaw area around here probably be darker, especially if the character has it's a bearded character. You want the skin, usually the skin around that area is usually darker than the rest, so just take note of that. So it's always good practice to look at reference. I have reference on my second screen, and that's where I'm painting this from. That's my reference point. So it's always a good idea to use reference for everything you do, and texturing is no different. Okay, changing things up, adding Adding a bit more yellow and orange to the skin. I think it's a bit too red, reddish at this point. So, and we'll just continue doing this until we are satisfied with the results. Now, another way to add variety. Right now, I'm just painting without any textures. So if I increase this to 0.9, I'll use a stronger color. If I increase it to 0.9, look at this. It's perfectly uniform. And to break this up, I'll use a texture max, new. I'll change the max mapping to random just so that it's not so repetitive. And I'll come to the texture tab in the properties menu, come down to brush marks, and I'll use a cloud texture. I use this most of the time, and I'll scale it up. I will scale it down. You have a texture with, should I say, something with a bit more contrast. But if I scale it up, you know it's smoother, but at least it's better than just painting without a texture. All right, so you have the whites and the blacks and the grays, and that is going to help to break up the texture. If you zoom in and see, now without this, if I cross this out, this is it without the texture. And if I add it back again, this is it. Okay, so it's a very good idea to use textures. I typically manipulate the cloud textures and a few other textures to get what I want, but you're welcome to use alphas you download from anywhere, and it should work fine. It's just to add variety to the skin, so everything is not perfectly uniform and bland. So for the lips, I'm going to increase the value a bit. I think I'll do that again. Make it a bit pinkish. Now paint over. Okay. I'll do that again. Increase the strength. For the top part, I'm just going to mix it with some of these. Perhaps if I was painting with lipstick, I'll probably go overboard, but just trying to get a natural look of the lips without any of that. That's a bit too much. So I'll come back and introduce the pinks again. Alt S, and let's see how this looks. All right, I can see the skin's coming out more. It's looking better. Now the next big tip will be to be very subtle as you paint skin. So if we notice, apart from the lips that I increase the strength, I usually paint skin at using 0.1 or sometimes even less than this, and it's because for skin, even though there are several colors, many colors in that undertones on the skin, you don't try to overdo it, and just so if I just come set this to let's say 0.6, I'll just begin painting, you know pick another color, because there are many colors. Pick another color, and just keep on going. You end up, if we save this as, you know can end up with a very reddish skin, a very uh orangey kind of skin, or something like that. Something would just be too much. So as you texture skin from my experience, it pays off to be very subtle with your stroke. So I keep it at point one, around that. When I increase it slightly, and for some certain areas. So with that, with the brush set to point one or set to a low value, you have to paint over several places, several times. But it pays off because you're not adding too much, and also you're not just making the skin a big mess. So as the colors are plenty, as the colors are many, you just have to blend them in and make them work. Yeah. So if you just dump everything with 100%, or everything set to point one or point five or point six, you have your. It will be like there are several patches on the skin, unless it's a specific look you're going for on the skin, or some kind of specific kind of skin. But generally, as you sculpt skin, you want to be very subtle with the changes you make. You just have to be patient as you continue sculpting, and you take a step back as you zoom out. You see the changes. You see the changes there. Following that, I'll continue laying out the colors. I think these ears are a bit too dark. Lighten them a bit. Something like this. So as you can see, the skin is changing slightly, but that makes the whole a whole lot of difference. So you don't need to go overboard. You don't need to make it so obvious. Just make it very subtle, and you see it works. So if you're finding that your skin is looking very patchy, you're seeing the colors there. Yeah, there are many colors, but everything is just looking jumbled up in there. It means it's probably that you're not being subtle enough with your colors, with your strokes. Everything is just sitting on top of each other without really blending in. So we're continuing to lay the colors on uh the base color, which is very very good, since we have that foundation, rather than just trying to paint over everything. Okay. And sometimes, even as I set my brush to a low strength, you still find that there are some, perhaps you've gone overboard on some places, so you just can get the smear. And I usually don't set this to point one, perhaps point three or point four. I find that works well. And you just begin to, as it says, just as you use your hand to smear paint or something like that, just so that things can blend in. And you also use the soft undo. I do not really see the use of this in this particular model. But let's say, let's go back to the draw, and I'll pick, let's say white, and going to increase yeah, the strength. Increase it again. Increase this value. Okay, this is better. So soften, just as it says, softens the edges, which is very very good for blending in the colors on the skin. Now this gets sluggish very very fast, so most times I have to zoom in and work on smaller areas. So as I said, I don't really need this. But if you find that you're having, you're having hard edges, just get the soften brush, and you can soften all those things out. Now draw. Let's come back here and continue adding more colors. I think for the Joe, I'm going to add some purplish colors. Okay, something around that, pinkish purplish. Yeah, mm, you can see. It looks too okay. It's at one. That's why. Let's turn it down. 0.2, which will take several strokes for you to see the difference. I think right now turn off symmetry. So you want to turn off symmetry at, I would say when you get to the midpoint of texturing, just so that you do not have a very uniform skin. And if we're doing bump mapping, it will be very necessary to turn it off, so you can get a better look, so it doesn't look uh too fake, even though it's stylized. Yes, just break up that uniformity. All right, the last tip for this video would be to remind you to use the blend modes available. By default, it's set to mix. By default, it's set to mix. I use multiply, I use screen, sometimes overlay, and a few other times maybe hue or saturation, but not so much. So let's set this to multiply, so it just darkens the areas, and I'll get this one, and just begin to darken the areas around the eyes. Not too much, so it uh doesn't give a different expression or look to the face, but just to darken those areas around the eyes, eyelids, and let's see the nostrils. Over here, the ends of the lips. Just let it flow. Okay, and screen to lighten things up. Usually screen, yeah, I usually set it high, like 0.2. So I'll use this around the nose and the forehead. Places where the usually the skin texture is lighter than the rest. That's where I probably use the screen blending mode. I just use it very very sparingly, so it's not too obvious, but just obvious enough to make a difference, but not too much. Not too much. I think I'll lighten this up a bit, and then lastly overlay, just to increase the contrast of the images, darkening and lightening at the same time. Okay, right now I'm going to continue working on this, and then I'll show something that is close to completion. Now I went in and I continued painting. Oh, sorry. I continued painting, and just continued applying the colors, and this is the result that I'm going to end with. So just to recap, number one, skin is made up of different colors, so try to put as much as you can, and also be subtle about it. So even as there are several colors on the skin, don't try to overdo it and make it so obvious that it becomes messy, becomes patchy. So, and then also make use of the blend modes, very very even the ones that are not commonly used, you can try them out and see how they work for you. So this is the end, and this is by no this is in no means the end of texturing per se. This is just the base color. There are other things that there are other texture maps that usually paint or usually have when you're texturing a character, but this is just the starting. And I hope that you've learned from this. So drop your comments, your suggestions, and I'll be glad to respond to them. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one.